Arriving on an emergency call to see a 5-year-old girl, a doctor froze in shock when she saw her husband in the apartment, who was supposed to be away on a business trip. It was another shift, another emergency call, a 5-year-old girl with a cough, fever, and difficulty breathing. It could be just a cold or something more serious. Blythe called out to the nurse, grabbed her coat, and climbed into the ambulance. Technically, it wasn't even her turn to be on duty. But when a colleague had called asking for a favour, Blythe had eagerly agreed to cover. Her husband Darwin was away on another business trip, and staying home alone had no appeal. The sirens wailed as the ambulance sped through the streets, and Blythe leaned back momentarily, lost in thought. She and Darwin had met during her second year of medical school. Back then, she had been an overworked student, barely able to make time for herself, let alone a relationship. But Darwin, with his calm demeanour and boundless optimism, had been persistent. They married soon after she graduated. Darwin had been her rock during those years, supporting her as she landed her job at the Children's Hospital. A decade later, she was still there, treating sick kids as a paediatrician. Yet despite 10 years of marriage, they had no children of their own. That fact had weighed heavily on Blythe. They had tried. She had undergone treatment, taken endless tests, and even Darwin had been checked. The results were always the same. Nothing was wrong, at least not that anyone could pinpoint. Darwin didn't seem particularly upset by it, which sometimes left her feeling isolated. If it happens, it happens. Maybe later, he'd say with a shrug, often distracted by work. Blythe wished she could share his indifference, but the void left by childlessness gnawed at her. Over the years, Darwin had thrown himself into building his business, opening a car repair company that was thriving now. But his success came at a cost, frequent business trips that took him away for weeks at a time. "I hate it when you leave," she'd complained during their rushed breakfasts before his flights. "You're the boss, aren't you? Can't you send someone else? You're gone for a week, sometimes 2, every month, Darwin. It's too much." Darwin would sigh, always patient. "It's hard to find someone trustworthy. I had a guy I trusted completely, but he moved to another city. Anyone else, and I'd just have to go fix everything myself afterward. You think I enjoy leaving you behind?" He might not enjoy it, but he didn't seem to mind much either. While Darwin was out meeting new people, seeing new places, and growing his business, Blythe's life had settled into a monotonous routine: work, home, and the occasional shopping trip. The quiet evenings stretched endlessly when he was away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. If we had kids, at least there'd be someone to care for, someone to rush home to, Blythe often mused. But that wasn't their reality. To Darwin's credit, he never reproached her for their childlessness. Still, it didn't stop her from blaming herself. They had even discussed adoption once. Blythe had brought it up during one of Darwin's rare weekends at home. "What if we adopted?" she had asked, her voice hesitant but hopeful. "It's not like we haven't talked about it before." Darwin had looked at her thoughtfully but said, "There's still time, Blythe. Let's not rush into something so big. Besides, adoption comes with its own challenges. Are we ready for that?" At the time, she had nodded, unsure herself. But now, each time he left on another trip, the idea crept back into her mind. "What am I waiting for?" she thought. "I'm in my 30s. How much longer am I going to hope for a miracle?" The ambulance hit a bump, jolting her out of her thoughts. Blythe looked at the nurse sitting beside her. 5 years old, huh?" she said softly. "Do we know anything else?" "Not much," the nurse replied, scrolling through the details on a tablet. "High fever, coughing, some difficulty breathing. Parents are panicking, of course." "They always do," Blythe murmured, though her tone wasn't unkind. She leaned back and stared out the window as the city lights blurred past. As they neared the address, her thoughts returned to Darwin. Would he ever truly understand how empty the house felt without him? Would he ever want the same things she did? She shook her head slightly and steeled herself. For now there was work to do. "Why are we heading out of our usual area?" the nurse grumbled, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Her name was Caitlin, and she was young, probably in her mid-20s, but she already had 2 kids waiting for her at home. "Is their station out of service or what?" Blythe glanced at her with a faint smile. "You know how it is. Sometimes we're just the closest available unit." Caitlin huffed and shook her head. "There are so many calls these days. Kids catching colds, parents panicking. What's the case this time? Cough and fever?" She checked the tablet again and muttered, "Couldn't they just call the local doctor?" "Maybe," Blythe said, her tone nonchalant, "but we don't know the full picture yet." "Probably another overreacting parent," Caitlin muttered, scrolling through the details again. Her voice softened, though, as she added, "Let's hope it's nothing serious. But you never know. Sometimes it's worse than we expect. I always hope for the best." "Don't even say that," Blythe replied, her voice firm. "Nothing's worse than a sick child." Caitlin nodded in agreement, then launched into an endless stream of stories about her own kids. How they'd battled ear infections, a stomach bug that went through the whole family, and the time her toddler stuck a pea up his nose during dinner. By the time the ambulance pulled up to the house, Blythe had heard them all. Blythe stepped out, her breath visible in the crisp evening air, and rang the doorbell. She straightened her coat, mentally bracing herself for what awaited inside. A frazzled woman in her late 30s answered, her face pale with worry. "Doctor, thank you for coming." "Please come in," she said, stepping aside hurriedly. "Where can I wash my hands?" Blythe asked as she entered, scanning the cosy but cluttered home. "This way," the woman said, pointing toward the small bathroom off the hallway. Moments later, Blythe entered the bedroom where the patient lay, a 5-year-old girl with flushed cheeks, her tiny chest rising and falling rapidly as she struggled to breathe. The little girl's wide, glassy eyes darted toward Blythe, brimming with fear. The woman began speaking quickly. "We've been on sick leave for a week. It started with a cough. We followed the doctor's instructions and she seemed better, but this morning the cough came back, her breathing got worse, and we can't bring the fever down." Blythe approached the bed with a gentle smile and knelt beside the girl. "Hey there, sweetheart, I'm Dr. Blythe. Let me take a quick look at you, okay?" The girl nodded weakly, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Blythe listened to her breathing, noting the wheezing and slight retractions at her ribs. Concern flickered in her eyes, but she kept her voice calm. "You're being so brave. Let's check your chart to see what the doctor prescribed." The mother fumbled nervously. "Oh, it's in the kitchen. Darwin, bring the chart," she called out. Blythe froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the bedside table to steady herself. "Darwin?" Her heart thundered in her chest as the sound of footsteps approached. The door creaked open, and there he was, her husband, carrying the medical chart. Darwin's eyes met hers, and for a split second the world seemed to stop. Shock rippled between them, though neither said a word. Blythe forced herself to take the chart from him, her hand trembling slightly. "Focus, Blythe, focus!" She flipped through the pages, her professional demeanor slipping back into place as she skimmed the notes. "Okay," she said, handing the chart back to him without looking up. "Here's what we'll do. I don't see anything critically concerning, but we need a thorough examination to rule out any risks. I'll issue a referral for hospitalization, and the hospital will send a transport for you." The little girl's lip quivered. "Can I come with her?" she whispered, her voice small and frightened. Blythe's heart softened. She crouched down beside the bed and took the girl's hand gently. "Of course, sweetheart. You'll have your mum with you the whole time," she said reassuringly. "And your dad can come too." Blythe's gaze flicked toward Darwin, her expression carefully controlled, though a storm brewed beneath the surface. She said nothing as she turned back to the little girl, writing the referral and making calls to the hospital. Her tone was calm and professional, betraying none of the chaos in her heart. When she finished, she addressed the mother with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry too much, it doesn't look serious. They'll run some tests and start proper treatment. You'll likely be discharged in a few days." "Claire. Her name is Claire," Blythe thought numbly, nodded, visibly relieved. Darwin stood beside her, silent, but Blythe didn't meet his eyes again. As she packed up her kit, Selene reached for her mother's hand. "Will it hurt?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No, sweetheart," Blythe replied, gently kneeling beside her. "The doctors at the hospital will take good care of you. They'll make sure you're feeling better really soon." Selene nodded, her grip on the stuffed rabbit tightening. Blythe forced herself to smile warmly at the girl before standing and heading toward the door, the nurse following closely behind. Back in the ambulance, Caitlin glanced at Blythe curiously. Was it a serious case? Blythe kept her eyes on the passing streetlights, her fingers tapping restlessly against her thigh. "I don't know," she replied after a pause. "It needs further examination. Best case scenario, it's just an infection." But her thoughts weren't on Selene anymore. Her mind was spiraling, piecing together the devastating puzzle. Selene was 5. That meant Darwin had been living a double life for at least 6 years. Claire and Selene, they were his other family. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Why, she thought bitterly, why lie for so many years? Why not just tell me he didn't want to stay in a childless marriage? I would have handled it. I could have let him go. But now, what am I supposed to do? The nurse's voice broke through her thoughts. "Blythe, are you okay? You look pale." Blythe blinked, realizing her hands were trembling. She clasped them tightly in her lap and forced a neutral tone. "I'm fine," she said flatly. "I just hope there are no more calls tonight. I really want to go home." "Me too," Caitlin replied with a tired sigh, oblivious to the turmoil raging beside her. The rest of the ride was silent. Blythe stared out the window, the glow of the city passing in a blur, her thoughts consumed by Darwin's betrayal. When they returned to the station, Blythe quickly finished her paperwork and clocked out. There were no more calls that night, but the silence she longed for offered no comfort. "Here's an expanded and more emotionally detailed version of your scene." Blythe drove home in silence, her thoughts a swirling storm of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. She felt like she was unraveling. What was she supposed to do now? Darwin had shattered their life together, and no amount of love or regret could piece it back together. When he returned, the truth would have to come out. There was no way around it. But how would she handle it? For 10 years, she had thought of herself as a happy wife. Now that identity felt like a cruel joke. As she stepped into her apartment, the familiar space seemed foreign and cold. The phone rang, startling her. She glanced at the screen. Darwin's face smiled back at her, the photo a bitter reminder of better times. Her thumb hovered over the screen before she declined the call. She couldn't do this. Not over the phone. Not now. The phone buzzed again and again, each ring like a needle piercing her already frayed nerves. Eventually, Darwin seemed to get the message. The calls stopped. Probably busy now, she thought bitterly. Speaking with doctors. Or Selene. Or Claire. Poor little Selene. Blythe's heart softened momentarily. The girl was sweet and frightened, just a child caught in the middle of this mess. She deserves none of this, Blythe thought. And then, more bitterly, I could have had a child like her. But I don't. Blythe barely slept that night. She lay on the couch, her mind replaying every moment of her marriage, every lie Darwin must have told, every trip that now had an entirely different meaning. The betrayal felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Early the next morning, she heard the sound of a key in the lock. Her heart sank as the door opened, and Darwin stepped inside. He hesitated, lingering in the doorway as if he wasn't sure he belonged there anymore. His face was pale, his eyes tired, and his shoulders slumped under the weight of guilt. "How's Selene?" Blythe asked, her voice cool and distant. She didn't bother with a greeting. Darwin exhaled, as though relieved the conversation wasn't starting with shouting or accusations. "I don't know," he said, stepping further into the room. "The doctors are being vague, or maybe they're just unsure. They've taken a lot of tests, but we'll have to wait for clear results." Blythe nodded, crossing her arms. "And why are you here?" she asked sharply. "You still had a week left in your business trip, didn't you? Shouldn't you be with your real family?" Darwin flinched at her words, but didn't argue. "Blythe, I'm sorry," he said softly, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. He rubbed his hands together nervously, his eyes avoiding hers. "I don't even know where to start. Just forgive me." "Forgive you?" Blythe's voice rose and she stepped closer, her anger spilling out. "Forgive you for what, Darwin? For lying to me for 5 years? For living a double life? For making me believe we had a future together while you built one with someone else? Tell me why. How could you do this to me?" Darwin opened his mouth to speak, but Blythe cut him off, her words coming faster now. "Was this all a game to you? All those business trips? Were they just excuses to go play house with them? Why didn't you leave me back then? Why keep up the lie? We dreamed of having a child together, Darwin. We even talked about adoption when nothing else worked. And now I find out you already have a child. Was any of this real? Did you ever love me?" Tears streamed down Blythe's face, hot and relentless, for the first time since she discovered her husband's betrayal. Her chest heaved as she fought to steady her breathing, but the emotions surged like a dam breaking, too powerful to contain. Across the room, Darwin sat hunched over, his hands gripping the edge of the table as though it could anchor him. "I loved you," Darwin muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He couldn't meet her eyes. It all just happened. She brought her car to the shop and we got talking. I liked her. I invited her out for coffee and then she invited me over. I didn't plan it. It was just a fling at first. 2 months, I thought. Then Claire said she was pregnant. Blythe stared at him, her jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He paused, waiting for her to respond, but she remained silent, her tears streaking her flushed face. "I was happy, of course," Darwin continued, his words fumbling in the oppressive silence. "But how could I tell you? I didn't want a divorce. My business was growing, and I was traveling a lot anyway. I told Claire from the start that I was married. I promised her I'd get divorced. Eventually." "Eventually?" Blythe spat the word like venom, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I'm sure you promised her plenty. What else did you tell her, Darwin? That your wife was fragile, sickly, might not survive the heartbreak. Did you paint me as some tragic figure to justify your lies?" Her voice wavered, but the bitterness in her tone was unrelenting. Darwin flinched as though struck, but she didn't stop. "It doesn't matter anymore. Nothing does. You have the child you wanted. I don't, and probably never will. They need you now more than ever. Celine needs medicine. Claire needs comfort and support. Go to your real family, Darwin." Blythe walked to the corner of the room where a small suitcase sat, its contents hastily thrown together. She grabbed the handle and shoved it toward him. "I've packed some of your things for now. The rest, and the divorce, we'll sort out later." Darwin stood, his movements slow and hesitant, as though afraid to set her off further. "Thank you, Blythe," he said, his voice filled with what sounded like genuine relief. "I knew you'd handle this like an adult. You're a remarkable woman." That was the final straw. Blythe's head snapped up, her tear-filled eyes blazing. "Enough!" Her voice cracked like thunder. "Just leave!" Darwin froze for a moment, then nodded, his expression a mixture of shame and resignation. He gathered the suitcase, mumbled a soft "goodbye," and walked out the door. Blythe stood frozen in place, her body trembling as she listened to the sound of his footsteps fading down the hallway. When she was sure he was gone, the dam holding back her rage burst. She let out a guttural scream and grabbed the nearest object, a large vase, one of their wedding gifts. With all her strength, she hurled it at the wall. "Bastard!" she shouted, her voice echoing in the now silent apartment. The vase shattered on impact, pieces of porcelain raining down like jagged confetti. But the shattered vase wasn't enough. Blythe stormed into the kitchen, her fury boiling over into a torrent of incoherent accusations that echoed through the empty apartment. "You lied to me," she screamed, her voice cracking. "To her, to all of us. 5 years! 5 years of business trips! How could I have been so blind? She grabbed a plate from the drying rack and hurled it across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. One plate wasn't enough. Another followed, then another. The sound of breaking ceramics mixed with her ragged sobs. She reached for the glasses next, smashing them onto the counter. Shards of glass flew in every direction, glittering like cruel little reminders of her broken life. Her mind raced with venomous thoughts. He doesn't even understand what a scumbag he's been. To me, to her, to both families. And we were both blind fools, me and Claire. Did she believe him too when he promised he'd leave me? Did she ever suspect the truth? 5 years. 5 years of lies. 5 years of betrayal. Blythe gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white, her chest heaving as she stared at the destruction she had wrought. Broken dishes, shattered glass, and fragments of her former life littered the kitchen floor. Her strength finally gave out, and she sank into a chair, exhausted. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to catch her breath. Her hands trembled as she buried her face in them, her sobs quieting into shaky exhales. After what felt like hours, she wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and stood. Her reflection in the darkened kitchen window caught her attention, a dishevelled, tear-streaked woman she barely recognized. She turned away quickly, heading to the sink to splash cold water on her face. As the coolness touched her skin, she forced herself to take slow, deep breaths. She looked around at the chaos in the kitchen and let out a grim, humorless laugh. I didn't know I had such a temper. Her lips tightened into a thin line. Well, at least I'll have something to keep my hands busy now. Methodically, she began cleaning up. Each sweep of the broom and toss of broken pieces into the trash felt like a small way to regain control. But the weight in her chest remained. The mess on the floor was easy to clean compared to the wreckage of her life. Her marriage, her trust, her dreams, all of it lay in shambles far beyond repair. Her mind flickered with bitter questions. Now what? Darwin was gone, and her world felt empty. But as the silence of the apartment closed in around her, she realized there was only one answer. She had to move forward. No one else could fix this for her. There were still bills to pay, shifts to work, and a life to rebuild, one step at a time. Blythe leaned against the counter, staring at her now clean kitchen. The ache in her chest hadn't lessened, but she felt a small flickering resolve begin to grow. The only thing I can do is stop crying and focus on fulfilling my duties, whatever those might be, she thought, her jaw tightening. And so began a new chapter in Blythe's life, one marked by the lingering fallout of a broken marriage. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick, but she would navigate this storm, piece by painful piece. Somewhere in the wreckage, she would find herself again. A week later, Blythe had just finished a long day of seeing patients. She was gathering her things to leave her office when the door opened. She looked up, startled to see Darwin standing there. He looked haggard, his eyes sunken, his usually confident posture slumped. "Hello, Blythe," he said, his voice low and hesitant. "I came to talk about Selene, and about us. Things are worse than we thought." He held out a folder, his hands trembling slightly. "I have the test results here. Please take a look." Blythe took the folder, her stomach knotting with dread as she scanned the documents. The words blurred together for a moment before the grim reality settled in. "She has a malignant tumour," Darwin said, his voice breaking. "The doctors say it's treatable, but she'll need surgery and chemotherapy. It's serious. Very serious." Blythe swallowed hard, her professional instincts taking over. "It's good they caught it early," she said gently, closing the folder. "The prognosis is likely positive with the right treatment. Don't lose hope." She hesitated, then added, "But are you holding up? You look awful." Darwin let out a shaky breath, sitting down across from her. "I don't know how to hold up, Blythe," he admitted. "Claire is expecting again. 3 months along. I feel like I'm drowning. I don't even know what to do anymore." Blythe felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. His pain was raw and real, and for a moment, she saw the man she used to love, the man who had once been her whole world. Darwin shifted uncomfortably. "There's something else," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to finalize the divorce and sell the apartment. It's a marital asset, and we really need the money right now. For Celine's treatment and everything else." Blythe took a deep breath, her chest tightening. She knew this moment was coming, but hearing it still felt like a blow. "Of course," she said quietly, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I understand." Darwin's shoulders sagged in relief. "Believe me, I wouldn't ask if the circumstances weren't so dire," he said, his tone pleading. "I'm sorry, Blythe. I really am." "I understand," she repeated, her voice softer now. "I'm not opposed. We shouldn't have trouble selling. The apartment is in a good area, and it's recently renovated. It'll sell quickly." Darwin nodded, his gaze falling to the floor. "Thank you," he said. Blythe truly did understand. She felt genuine sympathy for little Celine, who was now facing a terrifying battle, and for Claire, who was carrying another child while dealing with so much uncertainty. She didn't hate them. The only thing she couldn't quite figure out was what to do with herself now. Once the apartment sold, where would she go? What could she buy with her share? She realized she needed to start looking for a place immediately, even if it was just a temporary solution. And then there was the matter of her belongings. She would need to move soon, and she doubted she'd be able to take everything. But she wouldn't burden Darwin with her problems, not when he was already so distressed. "This is my mess to sort out now," she thought firmly, her resolve hardening. She needed to get used to the fact that Darwin was no longer her partner, her support, or her protector. From now on, she would have to solve her problems on her own. As Darwin stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Blythe, I know I have no right to ask, but could you keep Celine in your prayers? She really likes you." Blythe felt her throat tighten. "Of course," she said softly, her voice catching. "She's a good kid, Darwin. She deserves the best care." He nodded, murmured a thank you, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Blythe alone in the quiet office. She sat back in her chair, staring blankly at the wall, the weight of the conversation settling heavily on her shoulders. She had spent 10 years thinking of Darwin as her anchor, the one she could lean on when life got hard. Now she realized she was adrift, and there was no one to steady her. Blythe squared her shoulders, wiping at her damp eyes. "I'll figure it out," she told herself, one step at a time. The first thing Blythe did was reach out to her childhood friend, Emma, a close companion since school. Emma had always been a rock in Blythe's life, the kind of friend who showed up when you needed her most. Emma had married a man who lived in the neighbouring apartment complex and now lived close to her parents, just one floor below them. When Blythe explained her situation over the phone, Emma didn't hesitate. "Of course, come over. There's plenty of space. We can store your things at my mum's place. They'll be safe there, don't worry about that." Blythe felt a small wave of relief. Emma's unwavering support reminded her of simpler times, when friendship could make the world's heaviest burdens feel a little lighter. When Blythe arrived at Emma's place, her composure crumbled. She shared the details of Darwin's betrayal, of Selene's illness, and the decision to sell the apartment. For the first time in days, she broke down. Her tears were quiet this time, not filled with anger or despair, just hurt. The pain of losing everything she had built over the last decade settled in her chest like a stone. "Unbelievable," Emma said, pulling Blythe into a tight hug. "Don't cry, Blythe. It'll get better, I promise. But you shouldn't have agreed to sell the apartment. What are you going to buy with that money now? I'm not kicking you out or anything, but you can't live here forever. And those lovebirds already have a place to live, don't they?" Blythe wiped her cheeks and sighed. "It's not for them," she said softly. "The child is seriously ill. Her treatment will be expensive, And the apartment wasn't just mine, it's their child's too. Emma's face twisted in indignation. Well, your Darwin isn't exactly a pauper. He's a businessman with his own company. He could have sold his firm for his child instead of kicking you out and playing Sultan of Bukhara, needing 2 wives. I don't care about that right now, Blythe said, shaking her head. I'll figure something out. I'll buy a room in a shared apartment if I have to. I'll manage. Emma pursed her lips, clearly biting back further remarks. You're too good for your own good, Blythe. But fine, if you say so. Just don't let them walk all over you. The apartment sold quickly, and Blythe's share of the money was enough to buy either a room in a shared apartment or a small flat on the outskirts of the city. But instead of rushing into a decision, Blythe decided to wait. The stress she had endured, coupled with 2 years without a proper vacation, had left her feeling drained. She needed time to recover. When she told Emma her plan, her friend wholeheartedly supported her. That's the right call, Emma said. Take a proper break, go to a resort or something. A change of scenery might even help you meet someone. Blythe shook her head firmly. That's not happening. I'm going to visit my dad in the village. I need peace and fresh air, not new acquaintances. Emma raised an eyebrow, smirking. Say hi to Uncle Sullivan for me, she said. But don't rule out meeting someone. You never know where life takes you. Blythe waved her hand dismissively, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She wasn't interested in meeting anyone new. The thought of opening her heart again felt impossible. Right now, all she wanted was to retreat to a quiet place where she could cry on the shoulder of the one person she trusted completely, her father. Blythe's mother had passed away several years earlier, leaving a void in both Blythe's and her father's lives. After retiring, Sullivan, her father, had decided to sell their 2-room apartment in the city and move to the countryside. What would I do here alone, sitting on a bench with the old ladies or marching around the streets with walking sticks, he had said when Blythe expressed concern. Out there, the air is fresh, and there's plenty to keep me busy. A garden, a vegetable patch. I'm not moving across the country, just 50 miles from the city. You and Darwin can visit on weekends. There's a river nearby, a good bathhouse, and decent neighbours. It's not the middle of nowhere. And in winter? Blythe had asked sceptically. Won't you be bored? Winter? I'm bored here, Blythe, he had replied with a small, sad smile. No, I won't be bored. The apartment reminds me of your mother too much. Sometimes at night I hear her footsteps. It's unbearable. And so her father had moved to the village. Blythe visited him whenever she could, sometimes with Darwin, though he often found excuses not to go and sometimes alone. But she hadn't gone as often as she would have liked. Life always seemed to get in the way. Now, however, seemed like the perfect time to visit. Christmas was approaching, and her leave request had been approved without issue. This year, she hoped to spend the holidays in the quiet of her father's village, regaining her strength for the road ahead. There was so much to do, finding a new place, settling into a life she hadn't planned, but Blythe didn't think much about her personal life. What personal life? She thought bitterly. There won't be any children, and I don't want to live with some stranger who has his own past. No, thank you. As her father's house came into view, Blythe smiled at the sight of him working in the yard. His back was slightly stooped, his hair more grey than she remembered, but his movements were as purposeful as ever. He was busy repairing a wooden gate, completely absorbed in the task. "Dad!" she called out, her voice breaking the quiet of the snowy yard. Sullivan straightened up, squinting for a moment before his face lit up with a smile. "Blythe, my girl. I was just thinking about you, and here you are. Didn't even let me know you were coming." "Surprises are better," Blythe said, laughing as she approached. She brushed off the mention of him, thinking about her finding someone. "Later, Dad. Let's go inside. Why are you dressed so lightly? You'll catch a cold." "I just stepped out for a minute," he said, brushing snow off his hands. "Come on, let's get you inside. You must be freezing." The warmth of the house enveloped Blythe as they stepped inside. Her father quickly set about making tea, pulling out an assortment of jams, bread, and cheese. Blythe watched him with quiet admiration. For a man living alone, Sullivan kept his home impeccably clean and always seemed prepared for unexpected guests, a rare skill she knew not all men possessed. As she sat at the table, memories of her mother flooded her mind. She remembered the last months of her mother's illness, how her biggest regret had been leaving her husband alone. Tears welled up in Blythe's eyes at the memory, and she quickly looked away, hoping her father wouldn't notice. "What's wrong, Blythe?" Sullivan asked gently, his sharp eyes catching her expression. "Nothing," she said softly, shaking her head. "I took some leave and thought I'd spend it here. You don't mind, do you?" "Mind? Of course not," Sullivan said warmly. "In fact, I wouldn't mind if you moved in for good. What's keeping you in the city now?" "That's an idea," Blythe mused aloud, though she knew she wasn't ready to make such a decision. "There's not much left for me there anymore." Her voice wavered, and before she could stop herself, Blythe covered her face with her hands and began to cry. All the emotions she had kept bottled up came rushing out: grief, betrayal, exhaustion. For the next half hour, she poured out everything that had happened over the past couple of months. Darwin's betrayal, Selene's illness, the sale of the apartment, it all came tumbling out in broken sobs. "How could this happen, Dad?" Blythe sobbed, her voice trembling with pain. "How could he do this to me?" There, Sullivan said, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "Don't cry, daughter. It's not the end of the world. Husbands leave sometimes, and life goes on. You'll cry it out now, calm down, and move forward. Spend a month here to rest. Stay longer if you want. You could even stay here for good. A doctor is always welcome in a village." Blythe shook her head, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "No, I'll have to go back. I need to buy an apartment, and I don't even know if I'll have enough money." "If it's not enough, I've got some savings," Sullivan said firmly. "I'll help you, but this isn't really a life for a young woman like you. You still need to think about remarrying." Blythe groaned in frustration, wiping her tear-streaked face. "Why is everyone trying to set me up with someone? I haven't even finalized my divorce yet." "Because it's too early to give up on yourself," Sullivan replied with a shrug. "You're not even 35. Nowadays, some people are only starting to marry for the first time at your age. Who knows? Maybe you'll find someone closer to retirement, a quiet, non-argumentative old man. You can go to the clinic together, get tests, and feed pigeons in the park." "Dad, that's enough," Blythe said, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips despite the tears. "Let's stick to your real plans." "All right," Sullivan said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Let's heat the bathhouse. You'll steam out all those bad thoughts, and then I'll brew you a special tea from local herbs. It's powerful, good for the body and the soul. I swear by it." "That sounds perfect, Dad," Blythe replied. She wiped her eyes and stood. "But give me a moment. I'll walk around the yard, get some fresh air, and clear my head." Blythe put on her coat, tied a scarf over her head, and stepped outside into the fading light of evening. The air was crisp and cold, biting gently at her cheeks, but it was invigorating. She wandered through the snow-covered garden, her boots crunching softly with each step. The quiet serenity of the yard wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, allowing her thoughts to flow freely. In summer, this place would be vibrant and alive, brimming with flowers, fresh vegetables, and the sound of bees humming. Now, in winter, it offered a different kind of beauty, a still white canvas where everything seemed to pause, allowing space for reflection. Blythe admired how well her father had maintained the property. Despite his age, everything was in perfect order, the shed repaired, the fence sturdy, the paths neatly cleared, and every tool in its place. Nothing unnecessary cluttered the yard, a stark contrast to the chaotic mess of her own life. As she rounded the house, she noticed a pile of logs her father had sawed but hadn't yet split. Her heart ached as she thought of him. Poor Dad. Always alone, doing everything himself. No son to help him. Just a daughter who can't even give him grandchildren or keep a husband. A surge of determination overtook her. Blythe grabbed the axe resting against the chopping block. If she couldn't fix her life right now, at least she could help her father. She hefted the axe, surprised at its weight, and tried to swing it down onto the log. The blade barely made a dent, wobbling slightly as it lodged awkwardly into the wood. Undeterred, Blythe tried again, this time putting all her strength into the swing. The axe struck the log, but refused to split it. Her arms already ached, and her breath came in short puffs of cold air. After a few more failed attempts, she sighed in frustration, resting the axe against the block. A male voice startled her from behind. "Where have you ever seen a delicate woman chopping wood? Want some help?" Blythe spun around, clutching the axe defensively, only to see a man standing a few feet away, leaning casually against the fence. He had an easy, confident smile, his dark hair tousled by the cold breeze, and a rugged charm that matched the country setting. "You're visiting Sullivan, I take it." "A relative?" he asked, tilting his head curiously. "Yes, his daughter," Blythe replied, trying to keep her tone neutral despite her surprise. "And you live here?" "Not always," he said, stepping closer and extending a hand. "I'm Cedric, the son of the woman who owns the place next door. I'm just visiting for Christmas. It's a family holiday. Can't spend it without Mom." Before Blythe could reply, Sullivan emerged from the house, his voice cheerful. "Ah, Cedric, nice to see you." He walked over, clapping Cedric on the shoulder. "Meet my daughter, Blythe. And you." He turned to Blythe with a mock stern look. "What are you doing with that axe? Leave the firewood. There's plenty already stacked in the shed. I was just keeping those logs handy for a little morning exercise. You're no lumberjack, so don't strain yourself with that heavy axe." Blythe sighed, setting the axe down. Fine, I'll go inside." "Good," Sullivan said with a grin. "I'll heat the bathhouse. You'll feel like a new person after a good steam." Cedric watched the exchange with a smile. "Looks like you're in good hands. Nice to meet you, Blythe. Enjoy the bathhouse. Your dad's is the best around. We've all borrowed it more than once." Blythe gave a polite nod, unsure what to make of Cedric, and followed her father back toward the house. Her father was right. The bathhouse worked wonders. The hot steam enveloped her like a soothing balm, washing away her troubles and sorrows, at least for the moment. The scent of pinewood filled the air, grounding her as she let herself relax for the first time in weeks. When she finally emerged, her cheeks were flushed from the heat, her hair damp under the towel wrapped around her head. She felt lighter, as if the weight of the past few months had lifted just a little. "Oh, Dad, that was amazing," she said, stepping into the warm kitchen where her father waited. Sullivan smiled, holding up a steaming mug. "Now, where's that magic tea I promised?" he said with a chuckle. "Right here. It's ready, and it's a miracle worker. After the bath and this tea, you'll feel 20 years younger." Blythe took the mug gratefully and sat down at the kitchen table. The tea's earthy aroma filled her senses as she took a cautious sip. Warmth spread through her and she couldn't help but smile. "You're right," she said, her voice softer now. "This tea really is something. It feels like it's lifting a weight off my shoulders." "You see?" Sullivan said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied grin. "So, when are you going to start planning your next wedding?" Blythe nearly choked on her tea. "Dad," she protested, though she laughed this time. "Why are you so obsessed with marrying me off? You've been alone for years. Why don't you remarry?" "Don't compare me to yourself," Sullivan replied, waving her comment away. "My situation is different. Your mum was my one and only. But fine," he added, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I'll stop bugging you about it. I know how annoying that can be. People here love to meddle in single folks' lives." "Well, I appreciate that," Blythe said, settling more comfortably into her chair. "Right now, I just want some peace." Blythe's father chuckled softly, shaking his head as he stirred his tea. "Marigold, Cedric's mother, has been trying to pair me up with her for ages. She's a good woman. Nothing to criticize. But neither of us needs that. It's not for me, and it's not for her. Blythe raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his tone. And Cedric? What about him? She asked, trying to sound casual as she sipped her tea. Sullivan leaned back in his chair, studying her with a knowing smile. A good man, he said after a moment, but life hasn't been kind to him either. You know, he's got a story similar to yours, only the other way around. Blythe's curiosity deepened. What story? She asked, setting her mug down and leaning forward slightly. Oh, don't mind me, Sullivan said, grinning. You think living in a village has turned me into a gossip? Come on, Dad, Blythe coaxed, a playful note in her voice. Tell me, you can't start a story like that and leave me hanging. Her father sighed, his expression turning somber. Well, he began. He was married once, had a son. Everything seemed fine, just like it does with most people. They could have lived their lives happily, but then something happened to the boy. He got sick and needed surgery. They needed blood for a transfusion, and naturally they tested Cedric, being the father. Blythe's brow furrowed. And? The blood type didn't match, Sullivan said, his voice low. Turned out the boy wasn't his biological child. When Cedric confronted his wife, she admitted it. Then, instead of apologizing, she said all kinds of nasty things to him. They divorced, and she took the boy and moved to another city. Maybe to her lover, maybe not. Who knows? Since then, Cedric hasn't seen either of them. Blythe's hand covered her mouth in shock. That's horrible. And the boy? Sullivan shook his head sadly. The boy was young Blythe. Too young to understand any of it. Cedric really cared about him. Even Marigold thought of the boy as her grandson. Now she cries, saying she would have welcomed the boy even if he wasn't Cedric's. But what's done is done. That's awful, Blythe said quietly. Her voice wavered as she added, It's always the children who suffer in situations like this. True, Sullivan sighed. The boy must have gotten used to Cedric too. It's a shame. Life can be so messy. He gave her a small, sad smile. But enough of this sad talk. Let's focus on Christmas. How do you want to celebrate? Let's make a plan tomorrow, Dad, Blythe said, smiling faintly. Right now, I actually feel like going to bed. And you know what? For the first time in a long while, I don't feel any sadness. Not even a little. Sullivan's eyes softened, and he patted her hand gently. That's good to hear, Blythe. Sleep well. Tomorrow's a new day. The next morning, after a leisurely breakfast, their neighbour Marigold stopped by, her cheeks pink from the cold. She greeted Sullivan warmly, her voice cheerful and full of holiday spirit. Hello, Sullivan, she said as she stepped inside and shook the snow from her coat. Turning to Blythe, she added, And you must be his daughter. I'm Marigold. Lovely to meet you, dear. Nice to meet you, too, Blythe replied politely, though she felt a little awkward. Marigold wasted no time getting to the point. So, she said, hands on her hips, how about we celebrate Christmas together, neighbours? Why sit alone in our corners when it's much more fun to celebrate as a group? It's easier to cook for a crowd, too. 2 women can set a table better than 1. That's a great idea, Sullivan said immediately, clapping his hands together. What do you think, daughter? Blythe hesitated, unsure if she was ready for a noisy celebration with strangers. But refusing would have been rude, especially when Marigold's invitation was so warm and genuine. Besides, she thought, maybe it was for the best. A year that had brought so much pain deserved to end with laughter and good company. I'm in, Blythe said with a small smile. It sounds lovely. Wonderful, Marigold beamed. Cedric and I will handle the desserts and we've got plenty of wine. Sullivan, you can handle the roast, and Blythe will need your help with the side dishes. Sound good? Sounds perfect, Sullivan agreed. You've got yourself a deal. As Marigold left, Blythe glanced at her father, a small flicker of unease still lingering in her chest. I hope this doesn't turn into a matchmaking attempt, she muttered. Sullivan laughed heartily. Don't worry, Blythe. I'll keep Marigold in line, but you never know. Sometimes good things happen when you least expect them. Blythe rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. The evening turned out to be magical. They decided to celebrate at Marigold's house, as it was more spacious and perfectly suited for hosting a festive gathering. The women worked together in the kitchen, preparing a delicious meal, while the men braved the cold to decorate a tree in the yard with lights and ornaments. Laughter and conversation filled the house as the aroma of roasted meats, spices, and baked desserts wafted through the air. After dinner, Cedric approached Blythe with a warm smile. "Care to dance?" he asked, extending his hand. Blythe hesitated for a moment, glancing around. She hadn't danced in years, and a part of her wondered if she even remembered how. But Cedric's expression was kind and inviting, and something about the moment felt right. She placed her hand in his and allowed herself to be led to the small clearing where music played softly. They began to spin in a slow, elegant waltz, the world around them fading as they moved in time with the music. Blythe felt a strange lightness, as if the weight of her past was momentarily lifted. And then, mid-turn, it hit her. Her life wasn't over. Her husband's betrayal, which had once felt like the end of everything, was just a chapter in her story. An episode she had already begun to overcome. It was time to forgive, not for Darwin, but for herself. It was time to move on. Cedric noticed the shift in her expression and smiled. "You look like you just solved a puzzle," he said, his tone teasing. Blythe laughed softly. "Maybe I did." Over the next 2 weeks, Blythe and Cedric spent time together in the village. They weren't a couple, but they often found themselves talking for hours, sharing stories of their lives and dreams. Their conversations flowed easily, like two old friends catching up. One afternoon, Blythe opened up about her struggles with finding a new apartment. "I have no idea where to even begin," she admitted, shaking her head. "And with all the stories about scammers these days, I'm not naive, but I can be clueless when it comes to practical matters." Cedric leaned back against the porch railing, considering her words. "I can help," he offered. "I have a friend in the city who's a real estate agent, experienced and honest. I'll give you his number, and we can exchange contacts too. That way, you won't be navigating this alone." Blythe's face lit up with gratitude. "I'd be so grateful, Cedric. Thank you. I can't delay buying an apartment much longer. I've been staying with a friend, and while she's incredibly kind, I don't want to impose. It's time I had my own space." "You'll get through this," Cedric said reassuringly. "And remember, the village isn't far from the city. You can always visit your father. Are you planning to come back in the summer?" "Of course," Blythe replied with a smile. "I'll visit my dad, and I hope we'll see each other again." Back in the city, Cedric stayed true to his word. He introduced Blythe to his real estate friend, who turned out to be as trustworthy and knowledgeable as Cedric had promised. Together, they navigated the overwhelming process of finding and buying an apartment. Cedric was there every step of the way, offering advice, helping her evaluate options, and ensuring everything went smoothly. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, the apartment she ended up purchasing was close to Cedric's home. When the paperwork was finalized, Cedric joined her for the final walkthrough. They stood in the middle of the cozy living room, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. "I hope you like your new place," Cedric said, glancing around. "The location is great, and you've got a balcony. When the lilacs bloom under your window, it'll be beautiful." Blythe turned to him, her eyes warm. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I would have managed without your help." Cedric hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I have to admit something," he said, his tone quieter now. "I recommended this place on purpose. I wanted us to be neighbours. I'd like to keep seeing you, if you don't mind." Blythe's heart skipped a beat at his words. She searched his face for a moment before replying, her voice steady but honest. "I don't mind at all," she said softly. "I like spending time with you, not just when I need help." Blythe meant it. She truly enjoyed Cedric's company. While she wasn't ready to think about a relationship, She no longer dwelled on the pain of her past. Her life had shifted, her wounds had begun to heal, and she found herself feeling lighter, freer. She even reached out to Darwin occasionally to check on Selena's health and Claire's pregnancy. "Thank you, Blythe," Darwin said during one such call. His voice sounded tired but relieved. "Celine's home now. She's not completely healthy yet, but the doctors say she's in stable remission. Claire's doing well too. We're having a boy." "And how are you?" Blythe asked, her tone warm but detached. "Are you holding up?" "We're managing," Darwin replied after a pause. "And you? How are things with you?" "I'm fine," Blythe said simply. "I bought a new apartment and am settling in." "That's great," Darwin said. "You deserve some peace." They chatted a little while longer, the conversation polite and friendly. When they finally said goodbye and hung up, Blythe sat quietly for a moment, surprised by her calmness. It felt as though she had been speaking to a distant relative rather than the man she had spent 10 years of her life with. There was no lingering bitterness, no ache in her chest, just a quiet understanding that life had moved on, and so had she. In the end, Blythe accepted the truth. She couldn't have children, and Darwin had moved on to fulfill his dream of being a father. Why should he deny himself that right, she thought, her mind at ease as she finally let the situation go. This newfound acceptance paved the way for a meaningful conversation with Cedric during one of their meetings. That week, Cedric invited her to dinner at a cozy restaurant, a change from their usual casual walks and conversations. "It's time we made one of our meetings feel like a real date," Cedric joked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Blythe laughed, her cheeks warming. "I have no objections," she replied, matching his playful tone. The restaurant was quiet and intimate, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Over dinner they shared more about their lives, the conversation naturally deepening as the evening progressed. "Blythe," Cedric began, his voice steady but softer than usual. "From the moment we met, I felt like we weren't strangers. I don't know if it's fate or something else, but I knew that meeting you wasn't just a coincidence." Blythe tilted her head slightly, her expression warm but curious. "Then why didn't you say anything sooner?" she asked gently. Cedric hesitated, looking down at his glass for a moment before meeting her gaze. "I've been divorced for 3 years," he admitted. "And it's not easy to talk about." Blythe reached across the table, placing her hand over his reassuringly. "You don't have to share if it's too difficult," she said softly. "I already know the broad strokes from my father. He talks to your mom." Cedric chuckled lightly, though there was sadness in his eyes. "That's good," he said. "It saves me from getting into all the messy details. But let me explain this much. I've been alone for a long time, and I've thought about starting over, but I didn't want to deceive anyone." He paused, his voice dropping slightly. "I haven't been to the doctors, but I suspect I'm infertile. My ex-wife and I tried to have children for years, but nothing happened. Eventually she had a child, with someone else. I can't blame her for that." Blythe's breath caught slightly. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "Your story is almost the mirror image of mine," she said after a moment. "I couldn't have children either, and my husband couldn't accept it. Now he has a daughter, and soon a son. I don't blame him for that." Cedric nodded, visibly relieved. "That's why I hesitated to make you an offer, Blythe. You're young, and you might want children someday." "I do want children," Blythe admitted, her voice steady but thoughtful. "And I think I'd be a good mother. I've even looked into adoption before, but one of the requirements is having a complete family. It's not impossible for a single person, but it's much harder. And for single men, it's even more difficult." Cedric's gaze softened, and he leaned forward slightly, his expression resolute. "Well then," he said firmly, "here's my proposal. Blythe, marry me. Together, we can be the complete family a child needs." Blythe's heart raced as she absorbed his words. She searched his face for any sign of hesitation, but all she saw was sincerity and quiet determination. Slowly, she nodded. Yes, she said softly. I'll marry you. They were married soon after, just as a baby boy, unwanted by his biological mother, was preparing to enter the world. Cedric and Blythe finalized the adoption 6 months later, bringing little Tommy into their family. From the moment they held him, he became their world. Their life together settled into a peaceful and happy rhythm, full of laughter and love. Cedric and Blythe celebrated Tommy's milestones with pride and joy, his first steps, his first words, and his first giggle at one of Cedric's goofy jokes. But when Tommy turned 1, Blythe began feeling unwell. She dismissed the symptoms at first, weakness, loss of appetite, and constant irritability, thinking they were a result of exhaustion. Maybe I'm just tired. Or maybe I caught an infection. But darker thoughts crept in, thoughts she couldn't ignore. What if this is how it started for my mum? What if I leave Cedric and Tommy alone? I should never have married or adopted a child. Finally, unable to bear the anxiety, Blythe reached out to an old friend from medical school, who quickly arranged for a full examination. When the results came in, her friend greeted her with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Blythe, if I didn't know you, I'd assume you bought your medical diploma, her friend teased, shaking her head. What? Blythe asked, panic rising. Is it bad? Bad? Hardly, her friend replied with a laugh. You're 2 months pregnant. What? Blythe gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. That's impossible. Both Cedric and I are infertile. Her friend raised an eyebrow. Well, then you're both medical miracles. Or whoever told you that you were infertile made a big mistake. Either way, you're pregnant. And I assume termination isn't on the table? Of course not, Blythe exclaimed, her voice trembling. This is incredible. A child. A miracle. When Blythe told Cedric the news, he was equally stunned. He sat in silence for a moment, processing her words before a smile broke across his face. This is unbelievable, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll get to hold my own child, a son or daughter. He knelt to Tommy's level, his smile widening. Tommy, do you want a little sister? Tommy's eyes grew wide. Will you love her more than me? He asked, his voice small but earnest. No, sweetheart, Blythe said, pulling him into her lap. We'll love you both, but in different ways. Girls are loved a little differently, you know. Exactly, Cedric added, tousling Tommy's hair. And besides, you'll always be our firstborn. That makes you extra special. Tommy seemed satisfied with that answer, nodding solemnly. Okay, I'll be the best big brother ever. On Tommy's 2nd birthday, Cedric and Blythe welcomed a baby girl into their family. They named her Lily, after the flowers Cedric had said would bloom under their balcony in spring. Tommy was overjoyed with his new role as a big brother, proudly introducing Lily to anyone who would listen. Their home was filled with love, laughter, and the joyful chaos of raising 2 little ones. For Blythe and Cedric, the pain of their pasts became a distant memory, overshadowed by the happiness of their present and the promise of their future. As they watched Tommy and Lily grow, Blythe often thought of the unexpected twists her life had taken. What had once felt like insurmountable loss had led her to a life fuller than she had ever imagined. Cedric, Tommy, and Lily weren't just her family. They were her miracles. And in their cozy little home, surrounded by love, Blythe knew she had found exactly where she belonged.